Fair.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple. I can't even talk. Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. You figure I've done this over 200 episodes. It'd be easy to say my own podcast title, but another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. There you go. I got it out without any mistakes. A great episode for you today. A dear friend, somebody who's been on the show a bunch of times, and we talked about it during the interview, and I'll say it again just in case you guys forget. You'll hear it a few times. Go back, check out his past appearances on the show. He was a part of a great podcast, two-parter I did on the JFK assassination, where I had some of the best researchers and most interesting, intelligent people in regards to the JFK assassination, and we all just came together and talked about it. And it was the first part one did awesome. Then I did a part two, and it was really, really fascinating and interesting, and just getting everybody's perspectives and their own opinions on the situation and on every theory was just super fun. And it was one of the most downloaded episodes, if not the most downloaded episode of that year. So that was awesome. I got tons of positive feedback, and Russ was a part of that. He also in the past has been on to talk about his book, Family Secrets. Also talk about the Boston bombing. When that was happening, after that happened, he really did incredible investigating into that story and who the brothers were, and tons of just layers of that story. So definitely go in the archives, check that out. But yeah, Russ Baker from Who, What, Why is with me today. If you haven't been on his website, it's one of my go-tos. It's whowhatwhy.org. You can follow him on Twitter, Facebook. He's on all the social medias, and it's a great independent, no sponsorships, nothing, independent website for alternative perspectives, and he just does great work. Like I said, support him, support myself. I have a Patreon page, which you guys can find the links in the show description. Anybody who's been helping on Patreon, I truly, truly appreciate it. I try to give you guys advance notice of any guest that's booked or any shows I'm trying to put together. I let you know in advance that, hey, I'm trying to do this, or I just booked this guest. I'm going to record this show on this day or whatever. So it's a little perk to being a Patreon supporter. I kind of give you some behind the scenes information, which is, I think it's pretty cool, because most of the time you don't know who's going to be on the show until the show's release. So you get to do that. And I don't want to put any interviews behind a paywall. Like I tell you guys all the time, the show's about spreading it. It's about spreading these conversations and different perspectives and opinions, and hoping to provoke thought. And I can't do that if I have a paywall and I'm hiding some of these conversations. And that leads me to my next thought. That's also why I always tell you guys to share these shows and post these shows anywhere you want. My stuff's all open source, so please post it, share it, tweet it, put it on your social media. Like we talk about on the show today, there's tons of censorship. There's tons of people, not people, but Google and YouTube and all the big organizations just suppressing anything out of the norm, anything that goes against the grain. And I mean, so many articles that I'm sharing on Twitter and videos that I'm sharing on Twitter and my Facebook page, the Ripple Effect Podcast Facebook page, and on my personal Facebook page, which is Ricky Varandas. If you want to look me up, you can. Just send me a message. Let me know you're not a robot or somebody trying to send me porn or something like that. And just let me know you're a listener, and I'll accept any friend requests from any listener. So please hit me up if you want to connect with me. I'm on Instagram also. But my point is, so many of these videos and stuff, they're impossible to find, and they're hard to find. So that's why I share them and hope that people who maybe are looking for it or haven't run into it and probably won't run into it, because, like I said, so many of these outside perspectives are being censored, can get a different perspective, a different opinion, some interesting articles that isn't the mainstream narrative. So so thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it. Also the music, like I always tell you, people are always saying they love the music in the beginning of this podcast. If you do love the music, then go out and purchase it. All that money goes to supporting my music project and this project, my Ripple Effect podcast project. And you can find it anywhere you can find digital downloads. I put the links in the show description. And it's on Google Play. It's on Spotify. It's on everywhere you can get iTunes. And similar to this podcast, it's just about everywhere. And it's called The Ripple Effect. That's the name of the song. And the artist, which is just my solo project, it's called Theory 6. So Theory and then the number 6. So you can look it up and download it. I really appreciate anybody who supports the show in that manner too. Like I always tell you guys, if you can't support financially, spread the show, spread these conversations, and doing that is truly appreciated. And also, because technical difficulties always seem to happen from time to time, Skype had some update that I updated, and like an idiot, I updated it. And now, for some reason, my Skype recording software is only recording... Well, it's recording the guest. It's not recording me. So I'm probably going to put this up. Well, obviously, I'm going to put it up on YouTube. I put all my shows up on YouTube. But the video version of it's only probably going to be the guest's video feed. So you can see Russ, but you can't see me. Chances are, who cares? You've seen me about 1 billion times, right? And you care much more about what the guest has to say and what they look like than myself, which I think is okay, right? Because you guys can see me on the next episode, right? So not a huge deal, but I'll try to fix that so you can see the guests and I have the conversation, not just the guests, in case that gets a little bit boring, just seeing one feed instead of the two feeds. But either way, that's it, guys. Hopefully everybody's safe. Everybody's dealing with this nonsense. And I appreciate all the new listeners, all the new fans, all the people who are hitting up and sending me videos on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Much of them I have to watch immediately because they get censored or taken down. So, but I really love the fact that I've had so many people who are willing to kind of just share their perspective on what's going on and are willing to listen to mine. Honestly, I don't know what's going on, as you can tell, but I'm definitely willing to kind of look at things from all perspectives and definitely willing to push back against the mainstream narrative and what they're telling us, which is panic, and we all have to sacrifice all our rights and all our freedoms until this is all over. And thinking that people aren't going to benefit from that or lie to benefit from that, to me, probably a little naive. So thanks again, guys. Stay safe. I love all you guys, and I will see you on the next one. Peace. We'll start from here, and because I think it's an important topic, and like I said, it's been more and more of an issue of late, where somebody like myself who's constantly looking at every issue from every perspective and attempting to, and like I said, a lot of people like yourself, before I started this podcast, a lot of people that I'm a huge fan of that really got me looking at things from different perspectives, I would run into their work, and it wasn't too hard on Google or on YouTube to search any topic and kind of look into it and then find just alternative perspectives and investigative journalists and people who are really diving deep in topics that I was interested in. And now it just seems like it's impossible. Like every time you go on Google, it's like they're just force feeding you the mainstream narrative. You can't find any. I mean, sometimes I'm putting in the exact titles of things, and somebody mentioned an article, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that article. I think that's relevant right now, and I'll go look for it, and I'll put the exact title of the article, and it won't come up. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I started using DuckDuckGo as a alternative more often than not. But you were mentioning how, yeah, and that's something I didn't even think about, how your website as a alternative to the mainstream websites, it must be hurting you. And even with your own personal researching and stuff like that, have you also seen similar issues?
Yeah, I think that one of the problems is that those who abused freedom of speech to put out crap made it bad for the rest of us. And whether it was foreign countries hacking or creating fake personas, or it was just cynical people in our own country who were, just the con artists. I mean, I don't even mention names, but a lot of very popular people who have a big following were just putting out rubbish, and that tarred those of us who were trying to do thoughtful, careful, independent work that breaks from the pack. And this really sort of is squeezing us out effectively. Now, we're of course going to continue what we're doing, but we're having to bring on more and more marketing people and so on to try to figure out our way around things like search engines, things like problems with places like Wikipedia. I mean, there's just so many things, problems with mailing lists where your mail gets designated as spam and they don't even see it. So, I mean, yeah, we're looking at a kind of a censorship that, and at the same time, I don't blame these companies because they came under a lot of criticism for putting out dangerous junk, and they were merely the platform, of course. But once they had that pressure, they said, okay, we have to clamp down. And the way to play it safe was to only allow things from major brands.
Yeah, and it's getting harder and harder. And like I was telling you just a little bit ago, I'm having people send me stuff, and I've been kind of pretty outspoken on trying to look at this current event, this hot topic from every perspective, and I'm looking at every angle. And so people are sending me stuff because I think they kind of see that I'm open to looking at different perspectives and different opinions. And these videos, before I can get to watching them, a lot of them are taken down and gone. And that's, it's funny because I'm not sure, I agree with you, Russ, in regards to like, yeah, there's definitely people who were just, putting out a bunch of ridiculous stuff, and then that kind of hurt everybody. But I also feel like that stuff should still, like if somebody wants to put out a documentary on, and I've talked about this, like if somebody wants to put a documentary out on flat Earth, like I might think it's ridiculous, but it should still be out there. Like people should have the right to challenge that, and if they truly believe, in the flat Earth, they should be able to put out their perspectives. And as individuals and as intelligent humans, we should decide, what makes the most sense and what makes the least sense. Like let the intelligence of the public filter out the BS, and then what they decide makes the most sense. And I mean, do you kind of think that also? Because if not, then you have people who are like, we're going to decide what truth is, and we're going to, and as you know, like truth has a lot of layers, and a lot of times it's like you can go to one, something happens, you can go to one station and they have a narrative and a perspective on that. You go to another station, they have a different opinion, and it's no different than you and I. We go out, have a couple of drinks, and then we're telling stories from that party, and I'm like, wait, that's not how it happened, Russ. Actually, this is how it happened, and you're like, no, wait. So it's like when somebody says that, no, my perspective, my opinion, or the truth that I subscribe to is going to be truth with a capital T, and we're going to filter out everything else, that's dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complicated issue because on the one hand, freedom of speech is important. A lot of things are subjective. It is healthy to hear other viewpoints. On the other hand, bad information can also be dangerous. So, for example, if you're spreading the wrong information during this coronavirus situation, you can really expose everybody to tremendous risk. At the same time, there's also the problem with hate speech, which can lead to very, very dangerous things as well. And all you have to do is talk to, friends of mine who grew up in Germany, and they put all kinds of constraints in place because they learned the hard way what happened when they didn't have them. So unfortunately, I just think, like most things, neither extreme is right. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, and it's very tricky how you do that. Certainly, I think that maybe one solution would be to create a kind of a Yelp-like rating system where the public would sort of indicate as to, or you see it on Amazon with products and so on, is this stuff credible or not? Now, the problem with that, of course, is the bad guys are going to start gaming that, and then you have the same problem again. But in general, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I do shop for things, I look for something that's got I pleased to say my book, Family of Secrets, got almost solid 5 stars, and I think that's about right. You see some book and it's got 2 stars or 1 star average, probably you better stay away from it. So this is terrain that we need to inhabit, and we need to spend some time thinking about these things.
Yeah, Germany's, I know that you can't be a Holocaust denier in Germany, and you can't, they're very restrictive on talking about, those sensitive topics like that. I mean, personally, I think no topic should be off limits. If somebody's saying something ridiculous, I think they only make themselves look more ridiculous. It's if you put their ideas out there, people are going to look at it and be like, no, that's insane. But sometimes, like, who was that guy that guy who's a very popular racist in the UK? He's been kind of banned on all the social media platforms. And I know RT just had a show where not too long ago, a couple months ago, where they had him on, and the host kind of debated him or whatnot. And I think when you see him actually have somebody challenge him, it made his ideas look much more ridiculous than saying this guy's been censored. And it's like, I almost feel like it makes his idea sexy, because it's like, oh, this guy's been censored, he must be telling, he must have something to say they don't want us to know. So I think it can work against you too, right?
Yeah, of course. And your example where they're challenged is different than where somebody just has a platform not challenged to say whatever they want. I'd like to believe that people, you mentioned, having faith in the public, and I'm, as I'm sure you know, a huge fan of democracy and giving everybody an opportunity. But the sad thing is that we have a serious problem in this country, and that is ignorance. And ignorance has nothing to do with race or class or income or educational level. Some of the most ignorant people in this country are very successful. And we see it right at the top. A man who is incredibly ignorant is running the country right now in this emergency. And there's a network, Fox, which is dedicated to putting out stuff that is wrong so much. And they don't even, there's even no, it's just a memory hole. So they'll say something, they'll be wrong, and then they're still on TV. Now they're just moving on. They don't own up to it. They don't say my credibility is damaged because I was totally wrong about this. I mean, how often do you see any kind of a mea culpa there? And so the people who would watch these figures when they said things that were clearly wrong and irresponsible, who continue to watch them now that they've just sort of shunted the ball away and are moving on, they're obviously not discerning enough. They have certain emotional or psychological frameworks that enable them to keep on absorbing information that is demonstrably false. Now, that's a very interesting phenomenon, and there's a large and perhaps growing share of people in this country for whom logic has no appeal. And I do think we're in a whole new territory here.
Yeah, well, that person I was talking about was Tommy Robinson. I had to look it up because it was driving me crazy. He was on the show Worlds Apart on RT, and he was one of the few. That was one of the few places that were willing to have him on. And Tommy Robinson, he's kind of well known of being this anti-Muslim, person. And yeah, I mean, I think having him on to many people who maybe aren't familiar with his ideas can listen to them and challenge. But you're right. I mean, there is. I can understand the danger, but the problem, it's like, I guess it's a cliche, but it's a slippery slope, right? You start deciding that this person's ideas are need to be censored, then it's like, when does it stop? Alex Jones, obviously he's the common name, but it was scary how overnight everybody went, they were in cahoots and like just completely made his show disappear from iTunes, from Google, from everything, and that was scary. And the thing is, like, to me, a lot of times it does sometimes work in reverse, where it does give their platform, even more popularity, because it's like, who's this Alex Jones guy that everybody's talking about? I think in him as an example, he's probably so popular that he didn't get a whole lot of new listeners and stuff because of his name being in the news or whatnot. But it also, what ends up happening is too, it discredits everybody else who might agree on certain things. Like Dr. Drew, for example. I remember he was one of the first people weeks ago that was talking about how the media is really the one to blame for this hysteria, and they're creating this fear and all this stuff. And somebody's like, wait, I thought you didn't agree with Dr. Drew on this and that. And I'm like, well, because I don't agree with somebody on one thing, it doesn't mean I'm going to dismiss everything they say. I'm like, I'm going to look at everything they say and decide, like, okay, does this make sense or does that not make sense? Because I think too often somebody doesn't like the person who's writing the article, or they don't like the person who maybe is being interviewed or whatnot, and they're like, oh, he's a liberal or he's a conservative, so it's like I'm going to dismiss everything. I'm like, I'm just going to look at what he's saying, and if it makes sense, I'm okay with agreeing with him. I don't have to agree with people on everything, and I think people need more of that. I mean, I've had Jack Abramoff on, I've had Roger Stone on years ago, twice. I don't agree with these people on everything, but they had something that I did agree with them on that I wanted to expand on. And in that conversation, if we happen to challenge each other a little bit, I think it also makes you reevaluate your ideas a little better. Because if somebody's challenging me on what I believe, I'm going to be like, you know what? I haven't really thought about that. Or maybe this opinion I haven't really looked at all the perspectives before I decided this is where I stand on this. So I think those type of conversations are crucial and necessary. But I guess let's get right into I guess what the hot topic is, right? What's your opinion on what's going on? I mean, how I know that's kind of a broad and big question, but when this all started, has your opinion slightly changed as information has come out and as you've done some research or whatnot? I mean, or right from the beginning, has your opinion basically stayed the same on if people are listening to this in the future, we're referring to the coronavirus and COVID-19?
Well, one of our people reminded me that we had done a piece on March 3rd. We're taping this on March 27th. That's 24 days ago. Well, the world has changed in 24 days. One of our Washington people went to an event where there was some, I don't remember, it was an epidemiologist or a doctor or whatever, but it was warning that this was going to get really bad. And we did publish that. So I'm proud of the fact that I don't want to say, we were certainly not the only one. And I think they're trying to look to see how much had been done in this country, saying that it was going to be bad here. Obviously, there was a lot of coverage of the Chinese situation. And I think a lot of people sort of thought, well, that's their problem. But, the world is interconnected nowadays. And, if people can give it to other people, to think that just it's only going to be given to people, Chinese people or people in a particular geographic area, is the height of ridiculousness. And I mean, I think as a society, we were remiss, to put it mildly, to not take that more seriously. Now, certainly, I am looking at the statistics on the flu, and I believe the most recent flu, there were about 20,000 deaths. Now, that's a lot more than we've seen so far with coronavirus. But on the other hand, the numbers are going up so fast with coronavirus that I don't think we saw that kind of an exponential growth with flu. And I can tell you, I live in Manhattan, and I'm fairly close to some of these hospitals. I took a walk today. We're supposed to stay in most of the time, which I do, but you have to get out. And I walked around a little bit, staying far from other people. But as I was walking, I saw that a hospital near me is setting up these tents outside for emergency fast screening. And I mean, they are being deluged. And there are so many. The medical workers are exhausted. A high percentage of police already are out with coronavirus. Ambulance drivers. I mean, this thing is like it's like a sci-fi movie, and it is growing so fast. They're now putting out an appeal for retired medical personnel to come out of retirement. I mean, this is no joke. This is a gravely, gravely serious thing. I am pleased to see the level to which at least some people have risen to the occasion here in New York. I think people have been quite good about pretty quickly, I would say a large percentage, doing what they were asked to do. There were some people, and I still see them out, who are, in small groups. Obviously, they think that they're immune to anything. And of course, we've seen that around the country there were real problems in some of the states that typically don't trust what they're told. I don't want to get in a whole debate about that, but I mean, Louisiana has this huge spike now, and that is a state where polls show there was real skepticism of this, and also real receptivity to Trump's and Fox's diminishing of the seriousness of the matter. So people learned, but they learned too late. And I think this is an extraordinary moment that, I mean, we'll be, if we survive, we'll be talking about this for the rest of our lives, because it is something we're not prepared for on every level. And of course, there's also just the psychological and the emotional toll. I think it's getting to all of us. We all start getting weird because we're just shut down. And many people have nothing to do, or in our case, of course, I run a news organization, Who, What, Why, and we have more to do than ever, which is in a way too bad, of course, because we're dealing with a problem, but we are trying to provide useful, accurate, balanced information to the public. And of course, it's good for us personally because it keeps us occupied and keeps our minds occupied.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember I had James Corbett on, and I forget who else I had on, but we were just talking about this, how this is a good argument for universal basic income, because it's, if something like this happens, and I say this, like, society is only as strong as its weakest link, and when people don't have food and people don't have money, then crime's going to go up. And I could look at that and say that's their problem or whatnot, but no, it's all of our problem. Like, that means I'm going to get robbed. It means that my kids could be in danger. My wife could be in danger. It means we could all be in danger. And so having enough money for the necessities, I mean, it's kind of a good time to make that argument, because I mean, that's kind of what they're attempting to do now anyways, or even though, I mean, there's a lot of shady stuff that's going on with this surplus bill, but the stimulus bill, but it's, you can make that argument that, you know what, like, I probably feel a little safer knowing that in a week or 2 weeks, if they continue doing this and this doesn't end anytime soon, that people aren't starving, people aren't hungry, people aren't broke. And, I don't have to worry about being robbed if I'm going for a walk with my kids. And so it now would be a good time to make that argument. I mean, to push back a little bit, because the thing is, and there is, I think so much of what we don't know is what's scary. But do you feel like, because in my opinion, I feel like the media they should get a lot of blame for some of this hysteria, because there are numbers that aren't quite as scary. I mean, you have Dr. Birx. I'm not sure anybody's watching these press conferences. I feel like everybody's just watching people's opinions on the press conferences and the numbers, but nobody's actually looking at the numbers. Italy, for example, MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, they're all constantly just showing you this many cases, this many deaths, but they're not telling you, okay, well, how many of these are how many of these have pre-existing conditions? What's the average age? What's the age group? I mean, Italy is the oldest country in the world. The average age is really old. I think they said some ridiculous percentage of them have at least 2 pre-existing conditions. In the defense of, I guess, that argument, I get it, like cholesterol, diabetes, those are stuff that's not, you don't think of as a big deal, but it's also a reflection of how they take care of themselves. And it's like, if you have diabetes, chances are you're probably not eating too healthy. Maybe you don't take care of yourself too much. So they're not giving you any positive information. You're barely seeing anything about, getting vitamin C. I know I shared an article not too long ago about how some New York hospitals and also in China, they're doing some studies about treating coronavirus with vitamin C. If you believe vaccines work, then a vaccine is really just kind of igniting your natural immune system. So keeping your immune system strong makes sense. Getting exercise, getting vitamin D, hopefully when the weather gets better and the humidity, the humid air will help with your respiratory system. So, like, these are all positive conversations we could be having, and not scaremongering and fear-mongering, but all they're doing is showing this many cases. Well, not everybody gets tested for the flu. I mean, my parents were, about a month ago, had like one of the worst cases of the flu that they've ever had, and they couldn't get out of bed. It was really bad. And, who knows? It could have been the coronavirus. We know that there was direct flights from Wuhan to the U.S. At one point, and easily the virus could have spread before anybody had symptoms. I mean, a lot of people have it now and don't even have symptoms, so it's possible. So even the flu numbers are it's you're not really comparing apples with apples, because there's also treatment for the flu. There's a flu vaccine. So you look at those flu numbers, that's also making the argument, well, there's a treatment for it. There's not a treatment for COVID-19, which is the strain that is causing these issues. And so even though it's spreading, is it as important as like the death count and the percentage of people that are dying? Because one thing we do know in America too is that if we were having this conversations 2 months ago, we could talk about how unhealthy Americans are, how people are, they're sitting at a desk all day, they're not exercising, they're not getting any vitamin D, they're not they're not worried about their nutrition. People are obese, diabetes rates going up, cancer rates are going up. All these things are sky high. So if you take a virus that maybe potentially is lethal to a big percentage of people, now you take a big percentage of people being unhealthy, it could be a very dangerous recipe. So, do you subscribe to any of that at all, or do you think that maybe I'm being too I'm not being cautious enough?
Well, I have mixed feelings. I mean, I was talking to someone in Italy who is a well-informed person. I talked to her about a week ago. She actually didn't know anybody who had died, didn't even know anybody who'd gotten sick, which is interesting to me. And she's in a large city there. But she said she agreed that it could be because of the kinds of people and the pockets of Italy where there were many more health problems. On the other hand, we are hearing in this country about people who were not particularly sick. They may have been overweight, or they may have had this or that, but middle-aged people. We're also hearing about some young people who've died who were not known to be ill. So it's really hard to say.
Yeah, but doesn't the flu kill a lot of? The flu kills way more young people than this does. So, I mean, I guess where I stand on this, which why the media bothers me so much with the way they're kind of spinning this, because I think that the media could care less. I mean, they sold us into a Iraq war, that they could care less about the bodies, that all the people that died, all the lives that were changed forever, people who have PTSD, they don't give a shit about any of those people. So like the fact that like we think that now the media is trying to protect us, or the mainstream media, I should say, because obviously you could consider my show, your work, media, but the mainstream media, that they actually have a moral compass and they care, and they're not using this for political reasons or for pharmaceutical reasons. I mean, we passed a bill that that gave tons of money to pharmaceutical companies, just like, hey, come up with a treatment, come up with a vaccine. By the way, all the experts are saying we're probably not going to get a vaccine within a year, and who knows, the virus could change by then. That's why you get a flu vaccine every year, or I don't, but people.
Well, I think that when you work in the corporate media or these large corporate or even some of the large nonprofits, you're working in the establishment. And the deal is you're supposed to do what is considered to be responsible work at that time. And of course that changes. And so when there wasn't a consensus that this was a problem, then to say it was considered irresponsible. Once everybody agreed it was a problem, then not to say that is considered irresponsible. This is the problem, of course, with conformity. It's a bad thing. But that is what we understand, is that you can't venture out too far beyond the edge of the crowd without risking getting your head chopped off, effectively. And I think that's what we see with that kind of media. Taking bigger risks, finding unusual experts, taking other perspectives on this is hard. I would say on this, I don't think it's that we're following the crowd. I think we were early in believing that this was likely to be a problem. Look, the worst thing you could do is over worry. If that's the worst thing you could do, let's say you stay home and you didn't need to stay home. So what? Trump says that the cure is worse than the sickness, but that's hardly true. And if the economy suffers for a little while, the economy suffers for a little while. If we lose some opportunities, we lose some opportunities. It is better to be safe than sorry. So I don't feel like I'm an apologist for the mainstream media at all in advocating for what I think is reason here. And I do think that, when I look at the media coverage in general, You look at a large news organization like the New York Times, they had to pivot and basically have everybody in an organization with maybe 1,000 journalists all switch to COVID, basically, what to watch while you're in your apartment, and new ways of cleaning, and cooking recipes. And oh my God, can you imagine transforming, your sports coverage? It's a Herculean task to have to do that. But at some point, they realize nobody's going to pay attention to anything else. What's the point? We ran a piece the other day about the great game and power politics in the Ural region, in the former Soviet republics to the south of the Soviet Union. It's an interesting piece. How many people will read that? I mean, we feel we have to put out some other things. And I think you'll see on Who, What, Why that we will continue to cover problems with the voting system, climate change, other issues we think are important, because it's not healthy. As you point out, it's not healthy to panic. It's not healthy for everybody to suddenly rush all in one direction. We're against that. So we're trying to do our best to sort of balance it out. But even we recognize that this is the urgent issue of the moment. This is what people are worried about and concerned about. And rather than abdicating and saying we're not going to cover it, we're trying to cover it as responsibly as we can.
Yeah, I've had a couple of guests hit me up and they're just like, hey, if we're not talking about the coronavirus, do you think it's worth doing the show right now? Maybe we'll postpone it, because and I get it. I'm like, I can see where it's like, if that's not kind of the focus of the show, then, or the discussion, then it just feels like nobody's going to pay attention to it. You're better off doing it later when maybe more eyes will be on it. I definitely don't think that you're defending the mainstream media. I think just like I was stating before, if I happen to have a opinion that the mainstream media happens to have the same opinion, it doesn't mean I'm defending them or not. It just means that my I guess my way of or me looking at the facts, that's the logical conclusion I came up with. But it's this whole thing. I mean, there's just so many question marks in regards to like, where's patient zero? You look at all the CEOs. We had like this just huge amount of CEOs that like quit their jobs. Stepped down. People were selling stocks. Bill Gates stepping down from Microsoft. You had all this inside trading that now you're starting to see more conversation about. All these politicians in January, they were selling stocks and whatnot. So it's just like there's a lot of stuff that just seems super just convenient or interesting. And I just I am one of those people. I'm skeptical. Like, I think when the media lies to you and the government lies to you that often, then to me you're guilty until proven innocent. You're not innocent until proven guilty. So have you looked into any of these inside tradings or any of these CEOs quitting?
I mean, we're trying. I think there's a natural sequence in the news business as to how and when you cover certain things. There's usually the breaking story. There's the day of stories, the next day story, a few days later, week after. I was at ground zero when the buildings fell at 9/11. And, you're not, the first story you're doing is not who was behind this, as much as you're dealing with the fact that there's this tremendous loss of life, and what can people do to be safe? So the first thing was just, oh my God, this horrible thing has happened. The second thing was a loss of life and what's being done to minimize further loss of life. And then it was about general health issues around breathing in the dust. And then there was about
which
an
they
alarm
lied about also, right? Didn't they lie about that too? They lied about it being.
Of course they did. But my point is that even though I see things my own way and do my own thing, I was reporting at the time for some large news organizations, and I was reporting what I could see and what I could understand. Within a few days, I was already doing other stories. And I don't know if you recall Who, What, Why's coverage of the Boston Marathon bombing, but we took a huge risk. Within several days of the bombing, we already saw anomalies that suggested that we were not getting the full story. And I can tell you that's terrifying to be out alone raising those kind of questions, because people are going to attack you. They're going to call you names. I personally experienced some things like that week, but we stuck with it. And over the course of a year or so, we did about 70 different stories, which is almost 70 more than anybody else, really looking at the bombers and their relationships with the FBI and the CIA, what various entities knew about them, their ties to all different kinds of elements indicating that whatever happened there may not have been what we were told. Same thing with the Kennedy assassination. The story that the media 60 years on continues to say about this one nut who acted alone, and the actual evidence being pretty overwhelming that there's more to the story. But keep your job in the mainstream media. Even to this day, you have to say Oswald did it, and that was the end of it. Boston Marathon bombing, nothing more to see here, folks. People in the mainstream media are terrified, and they're trying to keep their jobs. They're trying to keep food on the table. And so when you are in those entities and you want to dig a little deeper, and there are people who will do it up to a point, they have to sort of bide their time and find the right moment to do it. And I think that will come with this. As you say, there already are stories. Certainly, you have to credit mainstream media with jumping right on the stories about Senator Burr and some of these others who sold their stock. They under normal circumstances, they might have waited longer to really jump on that stuff, but they just said, hey, let's just do this story. And I think they should have. At Who, What, Why, we're going to be looking at a lot of different angles here, including the one you referenced. I mean, I think there are people who take advantage of adversity, who spotted an opportunity, or whether or not they thought it was going to get bad, they may have in their own way contributed to creating a sense of panic and hedging that. And so there's a lot of important work to be done by journalists and others who need to make those kinds of inquiries.
Yeah, and if people who are listening to this who haven't listened to Russ Baker's past appearances on the show, when you guys were doing all that investigating into the Boston bombing, you came on and really did an hour of like really getting deep into it. And so if you guys haven't checked that out, please do go on his website, Who, What, Why, and look for it. Look for his articles, look for his appearance on my show. And you also did the roundtable discussions I did on the JFK assassinations, which were super popular. All these roundtable discussions I do where I have multiple guests on who don't necessarily agree on everything, but are willing to have the discussion. Those always get tons of downloads. And I think that's kind of a reflection that people really are willing and wanting to have a desire to really see things from different perspectives and get these people together. I think it is hard at times to get people who might not agree on everything to discuss things in a civil way. But when you can do it, it's awesome because you can really learn so much from those discussions. Have you looked into Event 201?
Not sure what you're referring to.
Yeah, it was an event that happened last year, and it was basically very similar. They're talking about an exercise that, similar to like, it seems like every big event, right? 9/11, they were having exercises. The military was having similar type of exercises and all this stuff. Well, Event 201 was another very similar thing where they were having this exercise of this virus that would spread around the world and how.
I saw. Yes, I saw something about that. Right.
Yeah. So I mean, that type of stuff is always. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that some of this stuff is coincidental. I mean, that stuff does happen, but I guess if there's enough dots, you have to eventually connect them if things don't make sense.
I think it's fair to look at anything. Anything should be fair game to look at. In my book, the difference is between looking at something and asserting something. And the whole basis, the whole reason I started Who, What, Why is we're agnostic about everything. And I know that people listening may be thinking, I wish this guy would throw some more bombs, but that's not what we do. We look at things carefully and we try to figure out what the heck is going on. Now, there may be more to that. I mean, the Boston Marathon bombing, there was a drill happening that day. 9/11, there was a drill happening that day. Are those all coincidences? They may be, they may not be. How common are such drills? You'd have to look at the statistics, so you'd have to know more about them. We did take a look at those drills with the Boston, with the National Guard, and tried to get information, and we were blocked. We also are not sure there is more to it, but certainly they're blocking it itself may not be even an indication necessarily that they have something to hide, as much as that's reflexive behavior and general non-cooperation in a time where institutions increasingly are not communicating with the media. So we don't know. But doing journalism right is tough, and it requires a sort of a combination of caution and boldness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, it's harder and harder to find people who you trust and you can find their work. I mean, I'm sure even now, if I try to look up old articles that you've published, it'd be hard unless I'm going directly to your website, which I guess in a way it's good because it brings traffic to your website, because I know if I want to find a who, what, why story, I go to your website. But a lot of new people, they're not going to run into it. They're not going to, and that's a huge, huge issue. And, like I said, when there's a group of people who say, oh, because I've been following your work for a long time. You've been on the show a bunch of times. I truly believe that you're more than willing to look at things from all perspectives, and if the dots are there and if it makes sense, you're okay with going down those roads and those rabbit holes. But when you have YouTube, Google, all these people who say, oh no, we're just here trying to spread the truth, we're trying to get rid of fake news or whatnot. And it's like, well, you guys have agendas, and we know that there's links between you guys and the CIA, and I mean, obviously, Bernie Sanders is a perfect example of somebody who's gotten screwed a bunch of times by the establishment. Tulsi Gabbard, I believe she was suing Google because people were having a hard time finding her stuff or whatnot. It was I probably should have looked into it before I brought it up, but I knew there's something along those lines where she was suing Google because of something they were doing. So I mean, this stuff happens all the time, and it's getting harder and harder to find these other perspectives, and that's why I am so skeptical. I mean, even there's a swine flu. I don't know if you remember this. 60 Minutes did a swine flu special because it was in what was it? It was in the 76 where they end up doing giving everybody this vaccine, and all these people, thousands of people, had neurological issues and all this stuff. And then one of the scientists was like interviewed, and he was they asked him like, how did you where's the studies proving that this was safe and effective or whatnot? And it wasn't, and a lot of people got harmed. And when you see history does repeat, and when you see conversations about a vaccine again and all this stuff, it's like, wait, are we going down the same rabbit hole? And then you look at the H1N1. I mean, I'm sure you guys covered the H1N1 story. How similar is that time to now, and why do you think it's being treated so differently? Because that was another very contagious. The death rate was high, but Obama didn't seem to get the same type of criticism. And I'm by far not a Trump supporter. I mean, I tell people, I'm like you. I'm a political atheist. I don't, when somebody messes up, I call them out. When somebody does something that seems like it's a good thing, then I'm more, I mean, look at just recently, they're charging, the Venezuelan president for narco trafficking or something along those lines. I'm like, where does it? And then you still look at these sanctions that we still have on countries that are struggling with the coronavirus. It's like, so it's like we can nitpick any politician, things they do well and things they don't do, but you try to look at things down the middle. Now I forgot what the hell my question was. I think it was about the H1N1.
Well, certainly, I'm not sure collectively how much we learn, whether it's the media or society in general. This is the thing that saddens me the most, and also the thing, paradoxically, that animates my work. And it's the reason I started Who, What, Why, is because I want to have a news organization that has historical memory. We tend to look for people who read books, which is not, and by the way, folks don't realize this, but many journalists, probably most, are not really intellectuals. They're not really necessarily thinkers or deep wonderers or ponderers. Their job is to dwell in real time and to perform some skilled services around collecting information, finding some sources, putting together a clear and perhaps compelling story. And that's a specific kind of work. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're, deep thinkers or that they have insight or even that they remember important things that somebody like you may remember. And so you come along and you're a guy who you're sharp and you read and you quest for knowledge, and you then sitting there as a consumer of this media, and of course you're disappointed. You're saying, hey, what about this? What about that? How come they don't remember that? This thing with Venezuela. I mean, is that true or is that not true? I mean, at Why we did a bunch of work on how they vilified Gaddafi. I'm not defending Gaddafi, but the stuff they said about him, they fabricated a campaign around him and fabricated human rights events that were precipitators of what was really a coup to take him out. And that was just dishonest. The media never got on that. Media just lapped it all up and covered it. In Syria, I don't think they really have given us an inkling of what's really at stake and why they turned on this guy. I mean, sure, he's a reprehensible guy, but he was okay all those years doing whatever he did. And of course, when there was an uprising against him, he savagely took it down. One can understand why anybody in power like that would say it's me or it's them. That story hasn't been told, and I think the media in general does a mixed job. I don't think the media is fake news per se. I think it's shallow news. I think it's uninformed news that fails to go deeper or offer greater perspective. But I do think, I read and listen to these major entities, and I do count on them for information. And I think on a certain level, you can get it. And sometimes you can get somebody who goes deeper. They do what they can within the framework within which they operate. I started Why to be a nonprofit, and not only a nonprofit, but not a nonprofit that some of them were founded literally by a billionaire. We're not that. We don't accept any advertising. All of our ability to operate comes from a whole team of a raft of skilled volunteers providing sort of our back end services, and then some funding from members of the public so we can at least hire some reporters and editors to do the basic work. That's how we stay clean. And then we encourage people like yourself, as sharp people who read and think, to join our brain trust to help us identify stories and angles. And then we'll do our due diligence. We'll look into things and we'll see what we find.
Yeah, see, I'm not saying that the media constantly is pushing propaganda or whatnot, but you look at like the pill epidemic, right? Which, I mean, I live in Massachusetts, Western Mass, not too far from a little town right outside of Springfield, Mass, where the Basketball Hall of Fame is. And I mean, Massachusetts got hit bad, and I know plenty of young people that were dying. I mean, I think in 1 year, I went to probably 3 or 4 funerals of friends of mine, or people I grew, well, maybe not close friends, but people who I knew growing up, or people that I was friends with at one point in my life, and yet during the debates, nobody was bringing it up, and nobody was talking about it, and that's the power of pharmaceutical, because the pharmaceutical industry, between those commercials, so you're watching the debate, or you're watching CNN, or you're watching whatever mainstream media you're watching, when those commercials come up, and it's a Pfizer commercial, or a Merck commercial, or a Bayer commercial, whatever pharmaceutical company it is, they have influence, and they're going to have influence on what they're sharing or not, and it just becomes, I forget who was on the show not too long ago. I don't know if it was John Barber or somebody who was saying how, the media at one point was not your moneymaker. I mean, if the people who were doing the investigating journalism, the media, the news, that wasn't the shows that were supposed to make you money. And now it's like, cha-ching, and now even more than ever, because you can milk the crap out of the story because you lack anything else on TV. There's no sports on. There's nothing on. You can't even go to, have any social gatherings because you're looked down upon. It's like, no, stay away from each other. And, this stuff. I said it on one of my past podcasts. I'm like, this is how they punish you in prison. They put you by yourself. I'm like, and we're all being punished. And I agree. If there was a greater good, if I felt like the threat was to the extent that I was being told. But one, I mean, China, and there is this China geopolitical thing where just like, okay, are they using this to kind of hurt China, blame China? I mean, you're starting to see a lot of Asian racism come out. I mean, they're kind of being treated the same way that Muslim people were being treated after 9/11. And, so there's it's like Brzezinski's book, The Grand Chessboard, and a lot of these think tanks that talk about strategies. Like a lot of people are playing checkers and they're playing chess, and they're one step ahead. And I'm not saying that, I know China has blamed the U.S. military of bringing the virus there. And it is unique that there's still no patient zero. We're not sure. Like there's a lot of speculation on if it came from an animal, if it came from a lab or whatnot, and even the way they were scanning people, they were having a hard time keeping up with testing people, the lack of labs and lab kits. So they were doing like CT scans, and that's how China was deciding on their numbers. And it's like, which is not really a real scientific way of knowing if you have the coronavirus or the COVID-19 virus or not. And so all this speculation, all this stuff, and it's like, when Phil Donahue had the highest rated show on MSNBC and then gets fired because he won't stop being anti-Iraq war, that tells you something. That tells you, when Jesse Ventura, who was he had a huge contract, I don't know with who, and but because he was anti-war, they're like, hey, we're going to pay you to stay at home. And, they had some clause he couldn't do any media for like 2 years or something like that. And that's kind of when he was out of like the public eye for a little bit. When they're willing to do that, then it makes you wonder, like, what the hell can I believe? Like, it's easy to critique China and saying, well, there were some mysterious deaths with the initial whistleblowers and their numbers. We don't know if we can trust their numbers or not. But why, many people don't have that same type of skepticism about our media. I mean, why isn't all our media channels have the same numbers? You go from, I could literally put on MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN right now, and they all have different numbers. And it's like, where's your sources? Like, like, where are you getting these numbers? And there's even some speculations about the flu vaccine and like some people getting sick. But there's a lot of stuff. But my point is, like, all this stuff should be entertained because, I don't trust the media when it's a for-profit organization. You run a non-profit organization. You don't have sponsors. Like you said, that's super important to me when I'm going to your website and I'm listening to your work. I don't have any sponsorships. For the same reason, because I don't want anybody to have a issue with what I'm saying or what I'm doing or whatnot. And I really do talk about, controversial topics, not because I'm trying to be controversial. Like we know some people will do it for the purpose of getting hits. I do it because I'm willing to entertain all topics and all conversations. It's not just a journey for the listener, but it's a journey for myself. As when I have guests on like yourself, I want to pick your brain and get your perspective and try to extract some knowledge because I'm also in a journey of trying to figure out, where do I stand on this and why do I believe certain things or whatnot. So that's all, to me, it's super, super important. I mean, do you agree with me and with the media? Like, where were they when the pill epidemic happened? Why weren't they talking about that? So, like, if we can't trust them when it comes down to like the Iraq War or demonizing, like you said, nobody's demonizing Saudi Arabia, but we're demonizing China or whatnot.
I think the media are a reflection of society in general. We're very, very slow to pay attention to most things. I mean, look at climate change. It took forever for people to pay attention. We're still not paying attention to it. And now there are people saying we shouldn't pay any attention to it because of coronavirus. We should just drop that and let it, bring it on. So this is just a problem that as a society, as a species, that we don't want to know. And we are set in our ways, and we're very, very slow to adopt new information. And those who want to contain human knowledge take advantage of that because they know as long as they can keep the public distracted. And it's an interesting time right now with all this sports stuff shut down because, look, of course sports is fun, but it is a complete opiate. And it is just something that sucks out so much in the way of resources, attention span. It serves as an escape valve for people's frustrations rather than maybe coping with the core problems in their lives. So suddenly, everything goes quiet and we can see it. But we are we're not so what's the right word? We're not so as a culture. We're not so psychologically healthy. And they always talk about being psychologically healthy, meaning you have insight. and you are self-aware, and you're also aware of what's around you. And I think as a society, we have some really serious problems with that. I think that we don't pay attention to some of our the basic things that drive us. I'm fascinated with the failure to acknowledge the amount of selfishness and greed that drives so much of our society. We love it. We celebrate it. We pay tribute to it in so many different forms. Trump is a manifestation of that. People who loved Trump thought that he was the role model for how you could be selfish and an SOB and benefit yourself. That people think that this is something to admire and to aspire to never ceases to amaze me. But that's where we are, and I'm hoping that maybe things like the coronavirus give us a chance to realize. Certainly, I can tell you, living in a city like New York, I think people in New York are more aware that we are in this together. We have to ride buses with other people. We have to be on the subway. It's sharing a crowded subway platform. It's frustrating sometimes. Sometimes you get angry, but we realize that we're all in this together, and we're cheek and jowl, wealthy people who've had every opportunity, and struggling immigrants are just thrown together. And in every walk of life, you get in a car share, and you're suddenly dealing with people different than you. And I think that's very, very healthy. So much of America is atomized. So many people have their suburban home, no communication with other people, really, with their neighbors. They don't see people who are different than them. And they begin to form these ideas from television, from popular culture, about what it means to live a life well lived. And a lot of it is not right. It's not right on any level. And I think sometimes these traumas, like coronavirus, are good for us because they shake things up, and they give us some time to think and to evaluate what it is that we're made of.
See, I would agree with you 100%, and I think that this is a great time to realize how important community is. I mean, I've talked about. I think it was Douglas Ruskoff who once on my show talked about the beginning of like the suburb, and I actually think it was somewhere in New York, and like how they wanted, the idea was to make people more dependent on grocery stores and less on community. And I think there's a huge issue with a lack of community in America. Like you said, we celebrate greed. If you look at the symptoms of addiction, if you're talking about alcohol or drugs or whatever it may be, it doesn't matter what thing you're addicted to, porn, video games, it's like, I need more of it. I'm willing to, ruin friendships, whatever it may be, to get it. It's never enough. All these symptoms, we can basically all agree more or less what the symptoms of addiction are. But when we have addiction to money, it's celebrated. It's like if you have addiction to anything else, we're like, no, it's bad, it's unhealthy. But if you're addicted to money, usually it means you're a successful businessman who is willing to lie, cheat, steal to get more of this thing that you already have a lot of, but you can never have enough of it, and or addiction to power. These things are a huge issue. So I think like I was born in Portugal. My parents came here when I was 4, and I think a lot of this is, and I have a lot of friends that are Polish and different foreigners, and I think a lot of these people come here because they want to get ahead financially, but then they lose what's really important. I forget who the author is who I had on my show. He wrote Lost Connections, and it was a great book about depression and really the true causes of it. And really, most of the time, it's community. It's a lack of having family, friends, purpose. And that's a huge issue. And I think that people come to America or even raised in America, and it's all about career, like get ahead, go to school for something that makes a lot of money, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be a whatever. It's all about financially getting ahead and making more money, which is basically like planting that seed that hey, happiness is making money, because that's everybody's telling me that's what I should be pursuing. That's where all my time should be invested in. And then you pursue that, and then you're like, wait, I'm unhappy, I'm depressed, I don't have friends, I don't have family. And I think a lot of people now, like when they can't leave the house, or they need something, you look around and be like, I don't really have somebody who I can go to for help. Or I mean, I've always been one of those people that I'm like, I will sacrifice, and I've sacrificed, making money for time with my family, times with my friends, and enjoying and extracting as much as I can out of life. And now I'm completely okay. If I need something, I know I live in a neighborhood in town where it's mostly Portuguese people. If my lawnmower is not working, before I could ask somebody to help, there's a neighbor walking over asking me, if I need help, and here's my lawn. And people, I think, lack that, and I think that's absolutely a huge issue, that people can take this opportunity to kind of reevaluate what's important in life. But unfortunately, we're told not to even get in social get-togethers. So I think the opposite could be happening. We're just like, okay, this alone time's good, but now too much alone time could be driving people crazy. I think Dr. Drew was talking about the psychological long-term effects of this, and I think that could be an issue, right?
Yeah, it is. A couple of podcasts worth drawing attention to. One, today we posted on our site, today being the date we're taping this, is about bats with an expert, very, very interesting, about the possible origins of coronavirus. And rather than blaming bats, it's actually that they have such good immune systems, unusually excellent immune systems, that this virus finds that the bats are so resistant that the virus then mutates to adjust to that, and then it becomes truly virulent. Not the fault of the bats. Don't take it out on them, folks. And so there's that. And then we did a podcast a few days ago with a psychoanalyst talking about the psychological effects of our being alone so much. And of course, it's not just that we're alone, because some people are used to that. A lot of people work from home, and if they're not married or they don't have kids, they're kind of used to that. But it's still, it's the pressure of being alone, and also being alone under pressure, alone under the pressure of the uncertainty and the fear and the general alienation and the lack of activity and the shutdown. And by the way, it's interesting, and we're going to have to go in a sec, but I closing thought would be, it's interesting. The organization that I run is predicated on having a whole bunch of skilled volunteers. We can't use everybody. It's a news organization, but we've got skilled IT people and human resources people and accountants and marketing people and so on, who come in and give of themselves entirely free because they believe in the cause of quality information and the value of that to the public interest. So we do that, and we're busy. We're busier than ever. We feel fulfilled. But I can see, I'm seeing it on the internet, people who have nothing to do and they're bored out of their minds. And I'm thinking, why aren't they finding something productive to do? I mean, how hard is it? Maybe people don't know how to do this. Go online and look for somebody else you can connect with. Particularly people who are elderly or ill, do something for them. Just be generous. Just entertain people. I mean, there are opportunities always in life to do something that's not just for yourself. And that's really what I would just love to leave people with, that thought, and encourage you. This is a moment to grow and to rise to the occasion, and have fun doing it, because we all become much happier when we're about more than ourselves, when we're about the greater good.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Now, I know that you said that was your closing thoughts. I did want to ask you just before you went, like, where do you see this going? Do you, I know this is constantly changing day by day. Are you optimistic? Do you think that things are being handled well? Do you think that maybe we should all just agree that, hey, you know what, this is a small sacrifice for a greater good?
I hesitate to prognosticate, and people are always asking me. I don't know why they think that journalists are wise or have a handle on what's going to happen. But people always ask me, well, who's going to win the election or something. I always say, why are you asking me? How should I know? I will say this. I don't usually do this very often. I do have kind of a gut feel, and maybe I'm wrong. I think this thing's going to get worse, and then it's going to stop. Maybe you say, well, duh, that's common sense. But I guess what I mean is I think that we're going to get through this. I think that the cases are going to continue spiking in a bunch of places. And the faster we all overreact and quarantine and stay there and suffer through the boredom and everything else, the faster this thing's going to wrap up. Is it going to be weeks? Is it going to be months? I don't think we're not talking about years. I don't think we're talking about days. Are we talking about weeks? I mean, I think it's possible that in a matter of weeks, the infection rate will have dropped enough that people will be able to begin adopting some measures of normalcy. The problem is it's all a numbers game, because if we miscalculate and we all start going to the gym again, we all start touching everything again and touching our faces, I mean, the whole thing can come back again. So this is where we need real leadership. And to your point about the media, I would like to see, I think they're trying. I mean, the big brands, I think they're trying to be responsible. They're trying to, as best as they can, get a handle on this and to tell people, look, as best as we know at this given moment, this is what you really ought to be doing, probably. But then we're not sure. So it's anybody's guess. But look, I mean, we have seen worse things with this. I wish people cared as much about climate change as they do about this. And it doesn't have the immediacy, but overall it's much more of an existential threat. And I would just hope that if people have free time at home, they would educate themselves on that and try to figure out what the heck are we all going to do to prevent the eradication of humanity, life on Earth. That seems to me a bigger challenge. Hope that's not too depressing a final thought, but there are a lot of challenges for us to address. And if we stop hiding from them and seeking to self-medicate all the time and get involved, there are a lot of studies showing that people who pay attention and want knowledge and want to seek solutions are generally happier and more fulfilled, less crazed than those who advertise the fact that they don't want to know. So I think seek knowledge, pay attention, get some balance, listen to Ricky Verandas and other voices that are original and different, and get that balance. Choose the balance that you need in your own life.
Yeah, the numbers thing is interesting, because it's like, what number is acceptable? When are we going to, do we have to have 0 deaths to open everything up? So, I mean, that's, I guess, the debate publicly that's going to happen. Well, what are people willing to accept? I mean, Neil Ferguson, I don't know if you're familiar, he's the one who had the number, the graph that in the UK that really, I guess, sparked the lockdown in the UK. He just came out and said that my graph is way off and it's going to be much less death. So it's like, who do we trust? Who do we believe? You know just as well as I do, science is not a exact science. It's I guess that sounded weird. It sounded better in my head. But it is one of those things where just like, even they have they can make mistakes. You one little thing changes in the in what you're inputting, and it can change the whole graph. What information's being neglected and whatnot. I mean, there's so many pieces. I mean, there's so many examples. I mean, look at just nutrition, for example. Like, we've been told, don't eat fat and don't worry about sugar and eat your wheat bread and all this stuff, and people are getting fat and obese. And why? Because it wasn't based on real science, and people do have opinions. They have dogmas, and it's just it's hard to know what to believe and not to believe.
It's not a precise science, but there is something to most of these things. I mean, I eat pretty healthy, and it benefits me. Everybody can make their own choices. There's no question that people who are suffering from coronavirus, I think you brought this up earlier, may have diabetes or all these other things that some of which have been induced by a bad lifestyle.
Absolutely.
There is something to all that. There is something to people doing graphs and charts and trying to calculate how these things might play out. And of course, as a society, we veer from understating and ignoring, which is what we did on this thing, to perhaps wildly over exaggerating on the other end. And that's what we do. You know, we undershoot and we overshoot until we get it right. That's life, and we're in the middle of that, and we'll see how it plays out.
Well, I have a feeling that Who What Why is going to have a lot of articles about the stimulus package and some of the stuff that's happening within that, all the corporations that are getting money and everybody who's gonna try to profit from this. And it's sad because I mean, even I know the Green New Deal, they were just like copying and pasting like this into this bill because they're just like, I get it, like this is a cause that you really believe in or you want to push or whatnot, but when you're hurting businesses, and I don't know what the long term. I mean, I want to be optimistic and believe we can rebound from this, but the Fed's printing money to pay for all this, and it's like that devalues the dollar. We've been in debt forever, so now we're going to be even more debt. I mean, I guess the counter argument is always like Bernie Sanders says, like we never ask how we're going to pay for wars, right? So it's like, you know, it's true. I mean, you look at all the money we spend on bombing people and wars and bases all over the world. So, you know, we stay afloat one way or another, you know, so maybe we can recover from this too. But these are all, you know, like I said, this is constantly changing and there's so many different, I mean, it almost reminds me of the JFK assassination where there's just so many different rabbit holes you can go down. And it's like, and sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming, you know, it can feel, and I think that's probably contributing to some of the anxiety because I talk to people all the time and I have listeners contact me like, hey, have you heard of this theory? Have you heard of that? Have you looked into this? You know, and it can be so overwhelming that it adds to the anxiety. It's like, I don't know what to believe. And then you kind of throw your hands up and, you know, and whatnot. So, you know,
it can be overwhelming, and it's so important to keep some balance on Who What Why. We are going to be looking at the future, not just dwelling on what's happening right now. We're also going to be trying to have some more humor, some more uplifting material as well. And I would just encourage everyone to do what I'm hoping to do after I get off here or a little bit later when I check in with my team is go for a run, 6 feet away from everybody else, and then come back and maybe have a glass of wine or something like that and watch a good comedy.
Yeah, I'll definitely be doing the same thing. So, but thanks, Russ. I really appreciate your time. It's always fun. Sorry, I had something in my throat. It's always fun to talk to you, and hopefully we'll stay in touch and we'll talk again. I'll be definitely interested into what Who What Why is going to be looking into and kind of the stories that are going to come out of this whole thing because, like I said, it's constantly evolving and changing, and there's so many layers to it. So thanks, Russ. So stay safe and hopefully nobody's sick, and we talk again in the near future.
You too, my friend.
Hey, take care, Russ. Good night.
I believe in the ripple effect.